Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melisa Liberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to this week's episode. Today, I am so excited to introduce you to Amanda Long. She is, in part, a marketing strategist and custom GPT strategist specifically. And we have a conversation about how you, as an independent consultant, can leverage private GPTs and GPTs in general to make running your business internally more efficient and scalable. And then also how you can leverage ChatGPT or other similar tools to capture your intellectual property and ultimately to enhance whatever it is that you're delivering for your consulting clients. So we cover so much ground in this episode related to practical, ethical, and strategic ways that you can integrate AI into your independent consulting business, as well as really practical and actionable next steps, including a couple of examples of how I'm using GPTs in my own business. So with that, I will introduce you to Amanda and let's dive into the episode. I am so excited to have you here today, Amanda. You and I met through one of my clients who's also been on this podcast and one of your clients, Stephen Dummett and Olivia of Tradewinds. And they introduced us thinking we might have some interesting work that we could do together. And they were right.
They were.
Yes. So it's always so fun to get that type of introduction. And so as we start off today's episode, I would love for you to, if you would just give us an introduction to you and your business, and then we'll dive in from there.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm glad that you had me on. And I loved working with you. And I'm hoping that we can kind of spread all of this awesome AI chat GPT through your clients, because I think that it's just such a good tool for small businesses. I think we have a leg up on big companies and corporations using AI. So first, I'm a marketing and operations human first. And I took a deep dive in 2022 when ChatGPT launched, and I've just been learning a lot about how to integrate it into not just marketing, but operations for small businesses as well. And I started building some custom GPTs, and they really got rave reviews by all my clients. And that's how we got connected, is my client, Steven. They were like, this is great. We need to share this with Melisa. And so I think it just went from there. So my mission is to help small teams use AI better by creating tailored AI tools that help empower them and help them be more productive and effective in their day-to-day work.
This is amazing. I can't wait to tell everyone what we've done and how it could impact their own businesses. But at first, before we dive into even the first question, I want to emphasize something you said just now, which is I think a lot of times we think about ChatGPT or whatever tool you use, similar Claude, whatever, as a tool for marketing or to make, kind of administrative tasks more simple, or maybe to do research. But what you just said also, which I think is equally as important, is the operationalizing our small businesses, our businesses of one. Most of us who listen to this podcast, myself included, are solo operators. We might have a consultant or an assistant of some sort who's not an employee, who's a contractor helping us. I know I have several of them, including you now, which is so amazing. But at the same time, wearing all of the hats, really. At the end of the day, when we're running these types of businesses, we're responsible for all of the functions. And so it's so exciting to see what you've been able to create using ChatGPT and AI to make it easier to run businesses of one, help free up our time so we can focus on higher value type activities that are in our zone of genius, and ultimately to be more efficient. So I can't wait to tell the story of what we created together and then how that applies to, what types of scenarios that this type of GPT could help other consultants to accomplish. So without any further ado, tell us a little bit about, if you're game for it, describing the type of work that we've done together so far for my business.
Yeah, for yours is really kind of where it started for me because I had a client who was producing a podcast. And like you said, that you have a team of people, contractors, and I do too. So I have a VA that's in the Philippines, I have a VA that's here in the US, and then I have teams that I work with within like my client teams as well. And so one of the things that I first started with actually was the Brand Voice GPT, which is something that we built for you. And we were able to go through and extract from all the amazing content that you have your voice and your tone. And we were able to pull that together so that your VAs and your assistants were able to go and pull that and create stuff that's in your voice a lot quicker so that when it comes to you, it's already in your voice. You maybe just have to zhuzh it up a little bit or add a little bit of extra flair to it. But for the most part, it probably gets you like 90, 95% of the way there. So the work that they were already doing, we were able to build a GPT that just takes it to the next level for them. And I really think that the brand GPT is where I usually start with everybody. I think anyone with a personal brand, anyone with a business should have a brand GPT because that really helps keep the entire team on target, on voice, on tone. I just did a webinar, or not a webinar, I did it in person. I do so many webinars and now I'm like in person. Last week I was in person, and that's what I was telling the same group is that it's hard to stay on voice and tone on brand sometimes. And it's really hard for new people coming into your business to do the same. And so when you can help your team and give them the tools that they need to keep that brand voice intact, no matter what they're writing, whether they're writing internal emails or external emails to clients, or you're, producing a podcast and content and whatever it may be.
Yeah. And we'll stop there because we did another project too. But before we move on to that, let's dive into this a little bit more and talk about, I'll share how I use it and then also how it might apply to the listener who's thinking about how might this apply to their business. So the first thing Amanda and her team did, is to create what she's just describing right now, which is a brand voice GPT. So she took a lot of my content, which, as a listener, you probably know I have a lot of content out there. We're on episode 220 something, or maybe even 30 at this point. So there's a lot of content. Amanda, though, didn't take all of that content. She took just pieces of it. So I point that out, and I'll come back to it, why it's important here in a moment. But she produced this GPT that then my team is able to use, for example, if they want to write a LinkedIn post for me, or I ask them to draft a blog post, those sorts of things. And it just gives a starting point. I would not, first of all, give my team an outline of what I was looking for or the topic or kind of a direction, but it's really helps them to generate quickly a draft that then I can review. And then they, sometimes they'll schedule it or publish it or whatever. So that's been really valuable. But I think the other interesting use of it is that I use it myself most of the time. So, a lot of times I write my own blog posts, I write my own emails, for example, those sorts of things. And I use it myself. So, because when I use ChatGPT just generally, even though you can train it over time, it keeps making mistakes, over and over again, or kind of reverts back sometimes. And I found personally that even without a team whatsoever, using the brand GPT myself for my own writing makes it just tighter in terms of
Yeah,
my own brand. The words that I would use, the words I wouldn't use are not in there, and helps me to create a much better first draft and second and third draft. So those are some of the ways I've used it. And I wanted to point that out too, because even for consultants who aren't yet at the point of having an assistant or don't have a podcast, that even if you don't have those types of people helping you right now, that the use of ChatGPT can actually help you avoid needing to
hmm,
hire or engage other external resources for a little bit longer while you're really trying to figure out what it is even your brand voice is. And then
absolutely.
I'll turn it
Yeah.
back over to you in one second. But the other thing I wanted to point out too is, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, Amanda, because I thought you would take everything I've ever written, all of it, the massive amounts at this point, and use it to create the GPT, but you didn't. And I think I want to hear more about, a little bit about how you think about this, because For most consultants who might not have been producing a lot of thought leadership yet or have a lot of content, this really makes it so much more accessible to them to be able to create their own GPT. So you don't need as much content as I have. Don't worry. It doesn't even use it if you do. So tell us a little more about that part.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really good point because the GPT is trained. Like we tell it what we want it to do. And so it's not just for your team, it's not necessarily just for you. It's like to tell ChatGPT while you're using it. So it's just in your voice. And so that helps you get through. Like that's another tick off the checklist that you don't have to do because it's just done for you while you're doing it. And the trick for the voice and tone is to get enough of your voice, the best quality pieces. The majority of probably what we did was podcast because that's probably your most natural voice.
Mm,
And that can pick it up like ChatGPT, AI, LLMs, they are all really great at pattern recognition. So they don't need a whole lot to start picking up on those things that are recurring in your voice, in your tone, in your style, in the grammar and the syntax and all those other little pieces. So as a marketer, I did a lot of brand messaging work with clients and I built brand messaging guides for years. And AI has been like the fast track. Now I can actually take a load of information, and that can be a handful of transcripts from a podcast. It could be a few of your blogs. And that's kind of what I do. I take from different places, I see what the patterns are. I walk through ChatGPT and I have it help me get to the point where I'm like, okay, this is right. And then I actually will feed it in a little bit more information too and say, okay, does this change
mm,
anything? And once I get to the point where it seems like it's just reflecting back what your voice and tone is, then we know we've got something. Now we
mm.
know, like, okay, this is really good. And then this is the point where I start creating a mock up for you. And then you get to test it and you get to say, hey, this is really great. But this is coming out and I don't use Oxford commas, or maybe I do use them and it's not use it will always use Oxford commas, but I don't. ChatGPT does. So like those are the little things we can train it on, the little nuances that are your voice, whether it's your voice or your company's voice, however
Yeah.
that is. So you don't need a load of information. And honestly, like if you start loading in too much information, it will start getting confused and it will start, we'll probably talk about later in this episode, a hallucination. It'll start hallucinating and maybe it won't be as great and polished as we want it to be.
Yeah. So, what would a consultant need at minimum, Amanda, to get a GPT, a private GPT, a brand voice GPT going for themselves?
Really think like you don't even have to have any public content, honestly. We can pull from your website. If you have anything that you've written, if you have drafts of things, if you've got emails that have gone out, anything that you write, if you have voice notes, we can take from anything that you've created. And even if you haven't publicly created anything, we've all written a ton. So whether it's our notes, I mean, it could be personal notes, you could even, and sometimes I'll assign clients that don't have content. I'll assign them, we'll go through a checklist. I'll have them hop on a Zoom with me and I'll interview them and talk to them. And we'll talk about who's their target audience, who they want to target. And then I'll just have them talk about the business and explain the company. And so from that, I can extract a lot as well.
Yeah. So, there are other ways.
Yeah, plenty of ways.
Don't be worried if you don't have a lot of content. This is the point of this, is to help you start creating some content in a more streamlined way when sometimes we get writer's block or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's talk about the second project. Tell us about the second project that you and I worked on together.
Yeah, we touched on this just a little bit. It's the podcast post production GPT.
Yeah.
So this one is unique. The custom brand GPT is more about our voice and it helps us write. This GPT that we created together, it was to produce pieces of content from your podcast. So you can interview somebody or you could have a solo podcast and you can take that transcript and then you can drop it into the custom GPT and we have it go through 5 different steps. So this is actually process. And this is where AI is going to start getting automated. And we're really just brushing the surface with this post production GPT. But this is where I start because this is the power of AI right now. And for small businesses that don't need to have complex, we're talking about AI agents, we're talking about workflows and all of these things. And we don't need to have those things necessarily in order to be successful and to really cut some time. So we built that GPT to give you a YouTube description. I tell people this all the time, like, because this is actually where I started with one of my clients too. We had a podcast and we needed, to just be able to kick out some of those initial pieces and give us a starting point. It's the goal of not starting from a blank page. So it'll give us the YouTube description, a podcast description. It will timestamp the transcript for us and give us the timestamps. It will write the first LinkedIn post, or it will clip out a post for Instagram and tell us what the clip, like what your carousel, not clip, your carousel should be. But it will also recommend maybe clips from the video or the audio transcript that you can create short little video clips from. So it can do different steps. And we built it so that when you drop that in, it just kicks it out. Your team or you can pull those pieces, put them where they go, and then start editing and making little changes. But it really cuts down, I think, on that. I mean, to have 5 pieces of content from a transcript within like 2 minutes, I mean, that's so much work. Like, how long would it take you to draft a YouTube description? Even with your templates, like, because I know you have templates. So, like,
Absolutely.
even with that, like, how long did just that one piece take you? And now how long can we cut that to?
Yeah. I mean, it feels like a decade ago, really, but a couple of years ago, I had one subcontractor who would help me her whole job was repurposing content and taking the podcast and
Yeah.
breaking it out into different emails and posts. And then I would end up rewriting it every single time. And I finally just stopped the whole thing. I mean, I kept going on with the podcast, but I just decided I'm not posting on LinkedIn. I think it took a year off because it was so involved. And
Yeah.
now
It's such a
so
barrier.
simple. Yeah.
What was a barrier is now something you can do. And that's another beauty piece of AI in my mind, is that we as small solo entrepreneurs, consultants, coaches, the fact that you can pick things back up again that you were not doing because it took too much time, and now you're like, oh, we can do this because now it makes it doable. Or one of the things as a marketer that I didn't do often was more in-depth analysis for a client. Like, we would look at the analytics, but like, now I can actually do some of the things I wasn't able to do before because I had a time constraint. AI just to help me get there. Like, it knew, like, I could feed it what I wanted. I could tell it, like, this is what I want from it. Here's a template that I like. And now I'm going to drop in analytics and I want you to like fill this in and let me have a conversation with you around it. And it takes like some of those things that we couldn't do before or weren't able to do because of time. It opens that up back to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us, so most of the consultants who are listening don't have a podcast. Some of you do. Most of them don't. So let's go through some other examples, Amanda, of what are some other effective ways that you could imagine independent consultants using GPTs to save time or scale their work or improve their outputs. Give us some thoughts.
My favorite, first, I would always recommend the Brand GPT.
Yeah.
Everybody, like I said before, everybody should have that. Once you have that, the other one that I really like to build, I call it a second brain or a co CEO. So this is a GPT that knows everything about your business. So this is one that's going to be, and you could, some of this really you can do with the Brand Voice, because in the Brand Voice GPT, we do put some other information about your business. So it does know about that. But the difference between that one and this one is that this really knows everything. You want to train it and give it the information on what your annual goals are, what your mission, vision, and values are. You want to tell it where you want to be, like what all your goals are this year and where you want to be in 5 years, so that it can help see where you're going,
Mhm.
where you're at. We train it on offers, what our offers are. We give it pretty much our business model. This is like your second brain. So everything that you have on your business, you want to build that into that so that this GPT can now help you make decisions in your business. So now you can go and ask it and say, hey, I had this really great idea, or I saw something on LinkedIn, because this happens to me a million times a day. I'm like, that's a great idea. I should do that. But we have to like vet those ideas
Yeah,
because
right.
it's too hard to do it all. And how do you make that decision? And so the second brain co CEO really can actually help you make those decisions, or at least talk through them. Like, you can talk through it and it can say, well, here's this recommendation. And you can actually ask it, give me the pros and cons, give me a side by side list, give me a chart or a table. it really gets so smart. And I do have a couple clients that have this, and they are like, I rely on this so much now because as somebody who's running your business and not having a partner or not having a board or, like we're not big businesses,
Yeah.
like how do you make those decisions? It's really hard. And when you don't have something else or, somebody else that's just right there, even if you have a business coach, which is great to have, but you can have that person there every day. Like they can't answer every question that you have every time a LinkedIn post comes up that you go, crap, that's a really good idea. I need to do it. But now you can go ask your second brain and at least say, okay, filter it through. That way, like, does this go to the top of the list? Does it get pushed for next quarter? Does it get pushed for next year? It's just something that helps you make those decisions a little bit easier.
Yeah. And as a business coach, obviously, one of the things that I find is that the depth of the conversations and the coaching that I'm having with clients is so much deeper because they've done some of that initial analysis
Yeah.
on using a GPT of, that you've described, or just Claude, for example, or ChatGPT without a second brain. So it'll be interesting to see how the second brain even extends that further, because then you're able to really take off some of the surface piece of it and start thinking through the different decisions and the implications and the opportunity costs and that kind of thing. So to me, it's such a good tool to have in the business in addition to coaches as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, it knows all those things about your business. And
That's
once you
right.
have all of that information in that spot, and you can keep adding to it if you need to, as things change and as you have new goals, that fluctuates with it. And then, yeah, and I think it's a great tool to use in conjunction with like a coach because now you've filtered, like I said, filtered through those like ideas and you're like, oh, okay, maybe next time. But, you get into a much deeper conversation.
Absolutely. As we were talking about operationalizing earlier, I think some of the multi step processes that could be really valuable for consultants too, as I've been starting to test and think about tools to create for consultants, are things like those multi step processes, creation of proposals, for example,
Yeah.
where you've got a really good template that you typically use. If you don't have one, you can go on my website and download one. You've got a really good template, for example, and then you load up a transcript of the call, for example, just similar to what you were just describing, Amanda, with the podcast steps. It's the same type of thing to generate proposals. So many of us do not love writing proposals, so at least to get a draft,
Oh my gosh.
could
Yeah.
be so valuable.
Especially if you have a template. So
Absolutely.
I think that even like you say, more processes like that, the more that you identify in your business. And if you've got, early on in your business, even before you have a team, I've always recommended that one of the best ways to be able to grow your team, know that you're going to utilize that next person, is to have a process identified because you can't delegate something if you can't tell somebody how to do it. And so if you've already got like, I call them standard operating procedures. It's like a corporate term, but it's definitely, it works for us too. So if you create a process,
Yeah.
so there's like my mind goes crazy with all of this. So I mean, you can open Claude, you can open Gemini, ChatGPT. Like these things work for everything. A custom GPT is specific to ChatGPT. We cannot build gems yet in Gemini. I'm really excited and hoping that they're going to do that soon because I do love Gemini, but I can't build those and share them. So it's been a hard, like that's been like our barrier for that. But that said, I would open ChatGPT and I would just brain dump whatever your process is. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be that first run through of like, what are all the things that you can think of that you do in this process? Build that out, ask it to create the little checklist for you, ask it to get started. And then there you have like a process that's starting. And then you can walk through that process, a couple times the next time you do it, fill in the blanks, and then go back to that chat thread and say, okay, here's some additional steps. And once you've got that, you really have the process. And once you have a process, we can actually see where in that process can do I have templates? Like
Mm,
you just said, you have a template for a proposal and now you have a call with a client. Okay, so I can take that call with the client. We can build a GPT that knows the template and it will fill in all the blanks for us based on that transcript. I think that really anything that you can put in a standard operating procedure and anything you have a template for is definitely something you can build a GPT for. Where I would say build a GPT versus just use it in the chat is where you want to feed it more background information. You could even use the Brand GPT to do that. You
Yeah.
could take your Brand GPT, you can pop in your template, and then you can pop in the transcript, and we'll do it for you too in that sense. But the more detailed maybe a process is, like the podcast one, we have 5 steps in there, 5 different pieces that it outputs. That's definitely a GPT. Or if it's something that you do really often, like I would say that would probably be a really good case for a custom GPT as well.
So many use cases, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure if someone listens to this in the future, it will sound very rudimentary, but
Yeah.
for right now, these are the tools that consultants and other small business owners are using to start getting really creative about how to be even more lean in the running of and delivery for our businesses.
Yeah.
Have you seen anything as you're looking at a lot of different businesses, Amanda, when you think about leveraging GPTs to create new revenue streams or service offerings, knowing that the people listening here are mostly sell to corporate clients? Is there anything out there that you've been seeing lately that might be relevant?
So the end that I see it on is really probably the end that somebody's building GPTs for that corporate team. So even corporate teams. So there's a lot of teams out there that
Right.
in the corporate world, they might be locked into like Microsoft Copilot. So you might have Copilot that's attached to their knowledge base, their drives, and that might be what they're locked into. And so I think that people are building things within that for them or helping their teams, learn how to use AI a little bit more efficiently. I would say for consultants and coaches, maybe that next step for you as a consultant or a coach, I would maybe take in all your FAQs. So if you've been working with clients and you have a lot of frequently asked questions and you've got answers to it, or if you've got a playbook that you use with those clients and things that are documented in that way, you could build a GPT for yourself and you can give access to those people. It's almost like having, a Melissa GPT. So they can go, oh, I need to go ask Melissa in between sessions. So
Yeah.
I need to go ask Melissa, how do I do this? Or what is this last thing that we talked about? If you have a database, a knowledge database, you can attach that to a
Mhm.
custom GPT, and then that can be part of the services. So I see that like is within services that maybe you've got for your existing clients. Maybe you have, I think we had talked about, I can't remember what it was that you and I talked about, but it was along the lines of like almost having like that coach in between coaching
Mhm.
and giving them a tool. So it could be part of your products, it could be part of a course that you're doing. But those are some of the ideas I'm thinking through.
Yeah, I mean, as you're speaking about these different examples, to me, it's so inspiring to because so many consultants are at a place where a lot of our work is bespoke. We're creating custom work for each of our
Yeah.
clients. And in a lot of ways, we like doing that because we like the variety. But at the same time, it can be really challenging to figure out what are you productizing. And so, several use cases that kind of came to my mind as you were talking. Number one, the ability to upload some deliverables. You may need to redact some of the information because it's client specific,
Yep.
but uploading a lot of different examples and asking the GPT to give you trends and patterns of tell me if you were productizing what I do, what would be the top 10 examples of how you might productize this work and make it more repeatable versus more custom and tailored every time. So leveraging it to figure out what those products are, and then to your point, providing some kind of, for a lot of consultants, we provide advisory type services. Sometimes the concern about providing advisory services is, am I going to be called all the time? Is the client going to pick up the phone as CEO of, whatever startup and asking me questions all of the time? And it could be really interesting to put some kind of a GPT together that serves a lot of the use cases, maybe not for the CEO who's your main stakeholder, but maybe for that CEO's administrative assistant or their accounting team or whatever it looks like to start providing more tailored resources based on your knowledge set
Hmm.
and becoming scalable in an interesting way. For so long we thought you had to scale a business really by adding people. In this case, it could be scaling your knowledge through some unique products.
Yeah. I think knowledge is the key here right now with AI. We're going to get to the point where I think it's going to take a little bit more off of our plates. But I think right now, when we think about the knowledge that we have and that we're offering, how can you be more readily available to your clients? And I think a custom GPT that speaks your voice and has your knowledge that they can access is just another piece of the puzzle that we can help provide. So, like we talked about, us having our own co brain or co CEO,
Yeah.
them having you as their co GPT, that means like the next call that you have with them might be a little bit more efficient. It might be a little bit more streamlined because they got an answer from here, but then they're like, okay, well, I want to come back to this. I asked the GPT, this is what it said. Can we get deeper into that? Like maybe that might be the way that that looks. I think right now we've got a lot, talking about AI agents, and those are coming. And I don't want to overfluff that because I think right now it's being a little bit over exaggerated in what can and cannot be done. Building an agent is much different than building a custom GPT. Custom GPT is like an AI assistant. An agent is a multifaceted entity that can do, it might take 5 different assistants that we have built and then do 15 different steps. And so an agent can actually take things and it can make some decisions on what it's going to, like, oh, I have this situation. I have all this knowledge to pull from. I'm going to make a plan and then I'm going to decide to execute on that plan. That's what an agent does. So in between those two things, in between
Mm,
a GPT and an agent, are agentic workflows. So these are automations in the marketing world for me. And automation is, I've been using those for the entire career that I've had in marketing. Something, like if you use Constant Contact or ConvertKit or any of those email software, there's automations in there. And so it's not a new thing. It's just maybe the way that we do it is a little bit different. And so there are some pretty cool things that we can do with that. It's definitely on the next level. It would be, like they are more expensive. You have to have more custom builds, and then you also have to have more software. And so those things are there. Like things can be done. And if got a client that really needed some more custom bespoke solutions, there are options. But definitely where I would start as, like as a solo coach, somebody who maybe doesn't even have somebody else on their team, or really the back end of your business, I think is where you're going to get the best bang for your money on this. And the more that you use this, the more you're going to figure out those other things like, oh, this other product, this other process that I have, or this other thing, or as you're using it too, you're going to start probably having more ideas on how you can support your clients and maybe some of these ways to monetize. The more you use it, the better you're going to just get at it and the better understanding you're going to have. And it's just going to kind of open up these doors of other ideas.
yeah, absolutely. An aside, I'm on the nonprofit board of my kids' swim team. I'm constantly using it because that's a volunteer. I want to be really impactful and very efficient. And
Yep.
it's been really fun just teaching all the other board members who are, different variety of school teachers and therapists and all sorts of different backgrounds how to use ChatGPT has been really fun too. But that's
That's fun.
a side
Yeah.
note. Okay, let's get back on track here. Tell us a little bit about what you might see misconception wise as you're thinking about business owners and their use of AI.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions and the things that's holding people back a lot is that you have to be tech savvy. I
Mm,
mean, it's not hard to build a custom GPT, building the instructions, doing, the steps, all of those things, especially when you are the subject matter expert. Like the building of the GPT itself is probably the most simple piece of building the GPT. You don't have to be technical. You don't even have to be technical, to go into ChatGPT and start using it and asking it questions. You don't even have to have a GPT to do any of these things that we talked about today. Like it makes it better. It definitely takes it to another level, but you don't have to be tech savvy and you don't have to have a big budget either. And it's, AI is not just for big companies. And I think we're in this area of AI right now that it's actually better for us smaller companies to use it because we don't have all the red tape. We don't have to get all the approvals. We don't have to worry about massive loads of data that these big
mhm.
companies do have. And then they have to worry about how do we, clean that data so that we can use it? How do we protect it if it's within our system? Like there's so many things that big companies have to worry about that we as small entrepreneurs do not have to worry about. Like we want to protect our data. We want to protect our clients' data for sure. Like that's much easier for us when you have a handful of data.
Right. That's right.
So, I think that a lot of people think, oh, I have to be, I have to really understand computers and all of this stuff. You don't need a big budget either. Also, the I think another thing is people think that using AI is going to make their work generic. And that's the magic of the brand GPT is that start infusing ourselves into it. And if you're using Chat GPT, it has, like you said, memory on. So it does start learning those things and it starts learning about you. I actually have built a separate brand from my smart marketing brand,
Mm,
and I wanted it to be a completely different voice and tone. I wanted to just, this brand was going to be not me, it was just going to be a brand. And I worked with ChatGPT to build a new voice, and I made another custom GPT. And those two GPTs write starkly different. And while it's not like perfect, and you're not always going to get the best, like exactly how you would write it, the fact that you can train it, it makes it way more personal than just straight out of the box chat gpt without a custom gpt behind it. So I think when people are getting generic outputs, it's probably because they're not putting enough information, they're not giving enough context, and so it doesn't come out the way that they want it to be.
yeah.
I think it actually enhances your unique voice, because sometimes I have a hard time writing. I can speak, but when I write, it's harder for me. So now I can take my voice and I can speak it, and I can dump it into ChatGPT and it'll write for me. So I think that that has enhanced me as a human, as a writer. I think I was like 3 months into using ChatGPT, and one of my clients was like, "Man, your writing has gotten really good lately."
Uh,
So
I have some help.
yeah, I had some help.
I love it. That's so good. Tell us, when you think about the key risks or limitations or anything with respect to that that you think about when consultants are thinking about leveraging private GPTs or just GPTs in general in their to run their business and also for their own clients.
Yeah, I mean, let's go back to data privacy because we were just talking about that. So I
Yeah.
think that just making sure that you're not putting confidential client data into this. And what I mean by that is like everything that we used for your custom GPTs to build your voice and brand, it was all public facing. Like we didn't go and dig into your private business information, your client's information. Like we didn't use any of that. We used everything that was public facing. I think the only limit here, or not limit, the caveat here that I would say is like when we are building the second brain, I do use more personal, like business information, not necessarily on clients, but definitely when it comes to confidential, private, personally identifiable information, anything that has to be protected. A lot of companies are using tools to help clean out some of that information. And what you can do is you can kind of use like false information. So change people's names, don't put their socials in, don't put their phone numbers, emails. But we want to protect the confidentiality because we don't know what these AI companies are doing with that data. It's not necessarily that I'm afraid it's going to take in this information and spit it out identically, and that somebody somewhere is going to be able to say, I need Melissa Lieberman's social security number or something like that.
Right.
I don't think that it's going to happen that way, but we still want to just hold it with the same privacy level that we do everything else in our emails, in our email marketing system, in your CRM. Like it's the same thing. So I would just be really careful about like specific data you're putting in. When I'm using a CRM and I want to get data from that, I will usually take like the dashboard information. So where it gives you like data or information, I would probably take that, screenshot it, and use that instead of the actual data that is used to produce that.
Right.
So, data protection, privacy, hallucinations is another one. And hallucinations is kind of a weird, like, I wish we had a better word for it because it's not hallucinating at this point anymore. At this point, it's just like, it's trying to give you, like, a great example. I think I just posted this on LinkedIn today. I was asking ChatGPT I screenshotted, or no, I got a URL for a LinkedIn post. And I was like, this is a really good post. I want Chat to make a checklist out of it. So I gave it the URL, knowing that LinkedIn is paid. So you do have to have like an account to see it, but there are some times where you can get a post and it will read it.
Yeah.
It was able to read it, but for some reason it started talking. It was the same topic and everything, but the post was about like visibility, getting visibility and using gated, like people who have podcasts and stuff, like use them as to leverage and to reach new audiences. And it had like some information in there that was a really good checklist. Well, it came back and it actually gave me really great information that was still relevant, but it was about anti gated information. So it actually flipped it. So
Wow.
until I went back into LinkedIn, copied the actual like text and then pasted it into ChatGPT, then it got it right. So that's a hallucination. So it's not like it hallucinated something that didn't exist or wasn't correct. It was just slightly off from what I was asking it to do. And so that's really the reality of a hallucination. When you're doing deep research, if you use these tools for deep research or market research, you have to check your citations because it will pop in sometimes here and there. I don't know what the percentage is. I don't know that there is a percentage, and I think it just varies. If you're using your custom GPT to extract data, it's probably going to be maybe a little bit more accurate in my experience, just because it's more like you have instructions set and it's kind of guided a little bit better.
Mm.
So those are probably like the two things that I'm really focused on right now. There's more, but like those are probably the two things I would say for your group. Like definitely keep in mind.
That's the thought process I like to use, which is I don't know what's going to happen with whatever I'm putting in here. So I'm just going to be
Yeah.
overly cautious of not putting any client identifying information or specific scenarios or company names. So as consultants who are listening to this are thinking about it, it can be really valuable tool, but just redacting any of that, like those things that could be extracted that would then identify their clients as the source of that information.
Yeah, I think that's just a good rule of thumb. And you could actually go through, especially if you have a document that is in Word already, just go through and find and replace. And
Yeah.
then you can use it. And, like just make sure you get out all that information that you don't want it to have.
So, as we wrap up today's episode, Amanda, tell us anything else we haven't covered that you wanted to share with the audience today?
I might just say, like, custom GPTs aren't just about saving time. It's about scaling our thinking and scaling the processes that you already have, taking what you have and helping you just document processes that maybe you don't have yet, especially early in your business. I think documenting processes is just the best way because you're ready and prepared to delegate the things that need to be delegated once you get to a point where you're like, okay, I've got too much. I have to hire somebody. And now you know exactly where that can be. So I think when you just think about a custom GPT, it's not just about time saving, it's about actually scaling the way that you think and using it as a thinking partner as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So good to have you here, Amanda. Tell the listeners where they can find you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on the podcast and sharing what we did because it's fun and I love doing these things. So you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm at Amanda Long. SMS is my handle. I mean, it's just Amanda Long is my name. You can also sign up on smartmarketingsquad.com/Melisa, and you can get more information on custom GPTs and how I can help build those for you, just like Melissa and I have built a couple together.
Yes, absolutely. And Amanda's so great to work with. I've worked with so many different providers over the years, and working with you has been so easy, so impactful, and really collaborative. So, if anyone who is listening wants to get a custom GPT made, I highly recommend Amanda. And she's made a link that is a referral link. If you've heard this on my podcast, so you can go find her and see if working with her would be a good fit.
Yeah. Thank you.
So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app. so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melisaliberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.